The following is a WCIA3 News special. This is Veterans Voices, honoring those who serve.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us tonight for Veteran Voices. I'm Marley Capper. Tonight, we give honor to the brave men and women who stepped up to serve our country. They sacrificed so you and I could live in freedom. Tonight is all about telling the stories of those who served, and in most cases, that spirit of service lives on. Most people can remember where they were when 9/11 happened. Jason Wills was in boot camp. Months later, he would be deployed to the Middle East, and when he returned home, he came back with a Purple Heart. It's been 20 years, and he's still dealing with the pain of the war.
All the patches here are the ones that I had on my uniform when I got hit. And this is the blood from when I got hit.
Jason Wills hopes the image of his blood-stained American flag patch will serve as a reminder of the sacrifice he and so many others have made for our country.
We ended up going to Afghanistan, and then right after that, that's when we went to Iraq.
3 months into Iraq, Wills almost died.
I should have died over there, and that's how I look at it. You know, I was supposed to die.
His company was responsible for patrolling and making sure there was no IEDs being set up.
When we turned around, 2 RPGs hit our truck. I was the gunner, and when it hit, shrapnel went all throughout the left side of my body.
He remembers getting taken out of the vehicle, going to the medics, and then being on a helicopter, fighting for his life before everything went dark.
I mean, I cannot die here. This is not going to happen. I had a daughter at home, and I wasn't going to leave her, you know.
And even though it's been almost 20 years since being ambushed, Will still deals with the impact of the blast.
I have a brain injury. I still have 7 pieces of shrapnel still in my brain.
He had to learn how to walk, talk, read, and write all over again.
Here I still have shrapnel that still comes out, small pieces, nothing major.
Memories of the accident have become a daily companion.
Survival's guilt sometimes, because I lost my platoon sergeant that day.
But despite all that,
wouldn't change it for the world.
Would you do it again?
Yes.
The same patch he used to wear now serves as a reminder to him that he never gave up. It's why he's a motivational speaker. He hopes his story inspires others going through hard times that you can and will make it through. The remains of a soldier were placed in an unmarked grave for over 100 years. But after he was identified, the Monticello Honor Guard wanted to give Randolph Thomas the military headstone and ceremony he deserved. During his life, Thomas was a Buffalo soldier, a member of an all-African American cavalry group formed in 1866. Thomas served in the late 1800s, both in the Spanish-American and Philippine Wars. He was honorably discharged. Thomas died in a work accident, and with his family back in Nashville, Tennessee, one would assume that the logistics and expenses of transporting his body back home was difficult, if not impossible.
He didn't have a headstone or a flag holder. It was, just important to, give him a long overdue, veteran ceremony.
We feel that every veteran should have an honorable service and full military rights because they did sacrifice for their country, and we think they should be honored for that.
Now, Thomas has a permanent marker at the Monticello Township Cemetery and was given a full military service, a goal of the Honor Guard. Now, they aren't the only ones who make it their mission to remember veterans. Every single year, Wreaths Across America decorates grave sites across the country. The Danville National Cemetery has 12,000 gravestones, but right now they've only raised enough money for 1,000 wreaths. Now, one mom hopes her story will encourage you to donate. Joyce Melton is 88 years old. Her husband died in 2010 and her son Kirk Melton died in 2012. Both are buried at the Danville National Cemetery. She says the pain of losing her son was too much and she didn't visit his grave for 2 years.
I just couldn't go.
So Kirk's best friend Tammy Williams went for her and decorated his gravesite that first Christmas.
I noticed that there was maybe 200 wreaths, but they were all in the center circle. There was nowhere back here at the back end of the cemetery.
Since then, Williams has dedicated her life to Danville's Wreaths Across America chapter, a nonprofit whose mission is to remember every veteran for the holidays.
So for $15, a wreath would get placed on their grave, and even if you donated one wreath, that would be one more veteran that got honored.
Melton says it meant everything to her, knowing that Williams and others donated time and money to decorate other veteran grave sites when she couldn't bear to do it herself.
What she's done to honor Kirk has just been unbelievable.
Melton now visits her son's site and has even gone to a Wreaths Across America ceremony.
See how truly solemn and uplifting it is, you know, and to hear the stories of all the people that they honor.
She says the Wreaths give her hope for the future, knowing her son will never be forgotten.
So when, you know, we're not around to put them, we know that somebody cares.
If you would like to donate or volunteer to set up wreaths, head over to our website, WCIA.com. I'd like you to meet Richard Hine. He joined the military to serve in Vietnam. At the time, he thought what was happening overseas was wrong and wanted to help. He left with more than just a Silver Star and the Navy Medal of Honor, but crippling guilt and cancer from Agent Orange. Now he wants to share his story so younger generations will know what our veterans have done for the country.
And we would call in airstrikes and kill thousands and thousands of people. And I didn't care for that, and I still don't today.
It's hard for Richard Hine to talk about the horrors of Vietnam.
I couldn't apologize to that many people. I couldn't.
Not a day goes by where he doesn't think about the war.
I thought I was helping by eliminating communism and found out it wasn't all about that, I didn't think.
But it wasn't until he got to the Ho Chi Minh Trail in 1967 that he realized what was really happening.
And yet I had one of the worst jobs that could be placed over there. I was a forward observer.
He was responsible for finding where the enemy was.
I ran a device called a Tipsy 21. It was a anti-personnel radar, and we could locate people out in the jungle regardless of how thick it was.
Thankfully, Hine was never seriously hurt physically.
And when I got out of there, I was very, very thankful for leave and leave alive, much like a very many veterans didn't.
Since coming back home, he's beat cancer twice, a long-term effect from exposure to Agent Orange during the war. He's also dedicated his life to public service.
There's 14 different organizations that I work for here in this town, and I've been in them for 40 to 50 years. Some of them, one of the main ones, I was on the fire department, and I've actually been involved with the fire department for 54 years.
He's involved with the Arthur American Legion, VFW, Okaw Fire District, Douglas County Fire Association, Douglas County Dive Team, Moultrie County Dive Team, and the Douglas County Board.
Trying to pay back our people for what I did to those people, I guess you'd say.
His story is hard to hear, but he wants his vulnerability to be a poignant reminder of why people serve. And he wants to encourage younger veterans to get involved with their local VFW and American Legions, because when you've seen war, sometimes the best ones that can help support you have been through it too. Well, we have lots of veterans that we want you to meet. They tell stories of triumph and loss, but whose messages will leave you thankful. Next, an Afghanistan veteran who says he's lucky to be alive, and a Vietnam veteran who got the flight of a lifetime.
Father did, my grandfather did. It's kind of a family tradition. My brother was in. So yeah, we've all kind of served.
Derek Fitzpatrick comes from a long line of military service. After graduating high school, he knew it was his turn to step up and serve, even if that meant putting his life at risk. He served in the Army and was deployed to Afghanistan in 2008. It's been 14 years since then, but not a day goes by where he doesn't think about his time in war.
February 14th, I literally came 2 meters from an RPG, blew up, and I walked away from it. Don't ask me how.
Derek Fitzpatrick is lucky to be alive. He almost lost his life in Afghanistan, but says even the threat of death wouldn't have turned him away from serving.
Our whole family's done it. So for me, it's one of those things, it was my time to step up to the plate.
But what really pushed him to enlist?
And after watching 9/11 on TV in 8th grade, that was definite. I had to go.
He was 14 years old when he watched terrorists take down the Twin Towers. That was enough for him to risk everything to save others. In 2008, he was deployed to the Middle East.
the unknown was probably the worst. Because you didn't know if you were going to be here today or not here tomorrow.
His company provided security to a project construction team, and during that time, he had a few scares.
So we rolled the truck on its side, and I actually popped 4 vertebrae out of my back. I popped them back in place. I have 80% disability from it.
He also locked eyes with the same terrorists he once saw on TV.
And it took quite a few times to get shot at that being scared, but being scared was comfort. It was when you were no longer scared of getting shot at is when it really scares you. Because you make mistakes. Confidence makes mistakes.
After 9/11 happened, the country rallied together.
The rest of the world hears you, and the people.
And the support of troops was at an all-time high, as many wanted justice for the thousands of lives lost.
We got gift boxes the whole time, just from people, even from people from California.
The support didn't stop there. A bus drove him and his squad through Illinois, and communities gathered to cheer for them.
It's about the only time I've ever teared up with something like that, because there were so many people on the side of the roads just welcoming us home.
And while the images of war often run through his mind, he says he would do it all over again, just so the next generation doesn't have to. Fitzpatrick wants to encourage other veterans to talk about their experience. He says it's better to have a hard conversation with someone you trust than to suffer alone. A Danville Vietnam veteran says he got the chance of a lifetime, or in his case, the flight of a lifetime. Ken Hunter and his son traveled to Washington, D.C. on the Land of Lincoln Honor Flight. Hunter says it was healing.
The area we're going to bomb is only about 70 miles from Da Nang Air Base.
The year is 1968.
It's a great way to go to war.
And First Class Petty Officer Ken Hunter signed up to serve in the Vietnam War. When he and thousands of other Americans returned, they did not always get a warm welcome. Tensions were high and the country was divided.
South China Sea into the...
When I got out, it was a lot of protests going on. I was home on leave one time, and it was really bad then. And when we got out, it was like they really didn't appreciate anything.
He says many veterans were angry, and some haven't fully healed from that hurt.
And I do feel relieved now that they've kind of recognized all branches of what we've done.
And while Hunter says he was never mad, he didn't find true healing for 34 years. That's until he and his son went on the Land of Lincoln Honor Flight to Washington, D.C.
And really enjoyable. And I think Tom will really appreciate it when he gets older, I hope. I did to have my son with me.
Hunter and about 100 veterans and their chaperones boarded a plane in Springfield. And when they landed in D.C., they were welcomed by people in the airport.
The best part is I got to talk to other veterans, and we got to hash out this and that, and be around them and what they've done and aspects of what their life was like.
He says the hardest part of the trip was seeing all the names of the soldiers who died in Vietnam.
It was like my generation. We saw the wall, and that's why I told Tom, I said that was my generation is gone now, so it can't be replaced.
Hunter says he enjoyed a day packed full of activities before they made the journey back home. And when they landed, they got the homecoming welcome that Hunter's wife, Linda, says they should have gotten back then.
You know, the appreciation that everybody was showing, but also the gratitude that they were feeling, even including the volunteers and the flight staff. It was just emotional, really, for everybody.
Coming up next, we'll meet 2 World War II veterans who also got to go on an honor flight. Both say being drafted for the war was a part of growing up.
Probably all of us knew at that age, I was 18, we knew that we were going to be drafted, so it was.
Men born after World War I grew up expected to be drafted. Kenneth Rellig says that was no different for him.
The war was about over, but they hurried us to get us over there because in basic training time, the Battle of the Bulge was going on. and they needed people over there, I guess.
Kenneth Rellig was drafted into the Army in November of 1944.
Onto French soil.
5 months after D-Day, a turning point in World War II.
Stubbornly defended.
And after basic training, I was sent to Italy.
He was trained to be a combat engineer.
And I went to school on mine warfare, mines and Bailey bridges and the like.
There he studied booby traps and how to disarm a mine.
Still some of the pictures that we had to draw. And from there we went on up to northern Italy to get on a ship to be shipped out to Japan.
They left on August the 12th, 6 days after President Harry Truman ordered an atomic bomb to be dropped on Hiroshima.
Specifies the unconditional surrender of Japan.
He believes that moment saved his life.
There was a lot of word that we were going to be having an invasion of Japan eventually, and knowing what would happen with that, how many people would not survive it.
But his day in combat never came because of the bombing. It was a grueling time in his life. After returning home, he attended the University of Illinois on the GI Bill, an opportunity he says he received because he served.
Which I probably wouldn't have been able to do had it not been for going overseas and being in the war.
Rellig dedicated his life to education and spent his career teaching. When he retired, he bought a Christmas tree farm in Shelbyville. Now, at 96 years old, he's enjoying the simplicity of everyday life and often looks back at his time in the service.
Nice book.
Glenn Brady was also born in the 20s. In 1941, he was sent to World War II. Now, he may be hard of hearing and blind now, but he can talk about the war as if it was yesterday.
Mostly what we went through was night bombings. The Germans would send airplanes over in the daytime to see if there was any, I suppose, different activity in the harbor, and if there was, then they'd send bombers at night and bomb pretty heavy.
Glenn Brady is 103 years old, but his age hasn't taken away his memory of war.
I was an Army medic, but I did multiple things. We were the most decorated, honored unit of the medical profession. Got the most awards in Europe, Africa.
Brady traveled the world. He went to England, Africa, and Italy.
But I did see a lot of bad things. The first patients we received was terrible.
He was also in charge of war prisoners.
Africa, I was in charge of feeding Italian prisoners and the German prisoners.
He was alive with some of history's big names, like President Eisenhower and General George Patton, but he also locked eyes with some infamous enemies.
Rommel, we called him the Desert Fox because he escaped, and he became, Hitler appointed him.
Brady says he's thankful he was never seriously hurt.
I got sick, and I was fortunate to be sent home. So I got home and discharged in Battle Creek, Michigan.
From there, he returned home to Macon County, eventually moving to Arizona to start and raise a family. When his wife died, he moved back to Decatur, where he now lives in an assisted living. All right, when we return, we'll meet a Vietnam veteran who was called to the front lines. He served as a combat medic and was seconds away from death. His story of bravery is next.
I didn't want to do it. In February of '68, my wife and I, we were married not quite 5 years at that point. We got a letter from the draft board that said, you're going to be inducted in the military.
He served in Vietnam as a combat medic and almost died from a grenade. Joel Dufresne came home with a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. Dufresne was drafted at age 25, which is a little old for the draft. Most people with him were 17, 18, 19 years old, and even though he saw the worst of it, he thinks his more mature age helped him process what was happening.
I could pray one time. I said, God, don't leave me. And they just kept shooting bullets around me. And so I peeked my head up, and he stands up. He's 20 yards from me, pulls his pin, and he's going to throw it at me. And I thought I'd had it.
Combat medic Joel Dufresne was moments away from death.
And it went off, made a big sound. And so I peeked up, and it went off prematurely, and it killed him. It blew him apart.
A misfire saved his life. But in the moment, Dufresne was still reeling from what had happened earlier in the ambush.
Threw a couple of grenades in on us, and in our position, and it missed me and missed Fred. It got one other radio man real bad. So I started to work on him, and he says, no, go work on Brown. So I went to work on Brown, and by the time I got him back to him, I got to my CO, and he died. He died in my arms.
And after that, things went quiet.
Silence was, I say it was deafening because it's silence, just everything went quiet after. It seemed like I was there an eternity, but we weren't there about an hour and a half, maybe 2 at the most.
His bravery earned him a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. It was a shock for the man who never imagined himself serving. He didn't tell his wife what happened until he was on leave.
So when I met Carol in Hawaii, I brought it to her, the case and the paperwork, the orders for it, and I gave it to her then. Because I didn't want to tell her, have her worry about what was going on. Because I tried to paint as good a picture as I could when I wrote letters home.
The couple had been married for 5 years when Dufresne was drafted in 1968. At the time, he was working at a factory making ammunition. He had no interest in serving, but didn't back down when he was called up. He trained as a combat medic for a year, and when he arrived overseas, he was put right into the action.
So I didn't think that was going to happen. I thought I was going to be in an aid station and giving shots and taking temperatures and making beds.
Dufresne spent a year in Vietnam, then came home to his wife, Carol. They settled into a life in Mattoon and raised 2 children. Dufresne spent his career working for UPS. He's humble about his time in the service. And when I asked him if he had any regrets, he told me no.
It was a change of life for me, and I don't know if I'd have been brave enough to choose to do it, but I did it and got through it, so that's always a good question.
I would like to say thank you to all the veterans that I spoke with. Thank you for your vulnerability and sharing the toughest parts about your journey. This has been a very special project for me because of my connection to the military. These are some of my family members who have served. There are thousands of men and women who are still struggling with the impacts of war. If you or a veteran you know needs help, call 988, then press 1 for the Veteran Crisis Hotline. Thank you for joining us tonight to honor veterans across Central Illinois. Good night.